this week, element 2, week 2 of BSB ADM 405. So last week we spoke about reasons for holding meetings, types of meetings, legal and ethical considerations, meeting participant requirements. We spoke quite a bit about that. And also how we go about advising participants of things. So the reasons for holding meetings: gathering information, requesting or discussing ideas, providing updates, gaining approval for things, delegating responsibility for different things. So types of different meetings that you can be involved in. You can have face-to-face, teleconference. We can have virtual meetings. So just exactly like what we've got here, what we're doing today. I've got a video at the end about that. And actually type that on the virtual one. That's something that will be an option for you with your project, which we'll also talk about at the end of today's seminar. So the different types of meetings also include things like your AGM, board meetings. You may be involved in them before. Union meetings, health and safety meetings. So anything from very short, informal opportunity type meetings to highly formalised, highly complex meetings with high stakes type decisions. So a meeting can be anything really. Meeting legal and ethical requirements, so the considerations, so ethical, thinking about our code of conduct, those sort of things. Legal, state, federal requirements, so privacy laws, those sort of things. Legal and ethical considerations also come under your policies and procedures in your different organisations. Meeting our requirements, so we spoke a bit about that, about things to consider when you're organising and planning for your meetings, especially if you're doing them off-site or if you've got parking issues, accessibility issues, so not just for ambulant people, but also people with who may have disabilities that are coming along. Definitely need to consider all these sort of things: special needs, parking, timing, refreshments, venues, how much these are going to cost, and how many participants are going to be there. So things that can blow out your cost, and timings, those sort of things. And again, how we're going to advise our participants of the meeting. So today, so element 2, so we're going to look at preparing notice of meeting, agenda and meeting papers in accordance with your requirements, checking documentation for accuracy and correcting any areas. So similar to what we did back when we were looking at our writing complex documents. You'll see some familiar terminology in there. Distributing our documentation to participants within designated timelines, and a little bit at the end about preparing spare sets of documents. So in your e-learning, this is part 2 under BSB ADM 405, which you should be enrolled in if you're on track through the course at the moment. So some people hadn't been enrolled in this particular unit yet because they're a little bit behind. So if you're enrolled in this unit, it'll be on Catapult and it'll be under ADM 405. Today is part 2. So preparing and just to prepare and distribute our documentation for meetings. So meetings need to have a clear and concise agenda. So this is more obviously talking about formal meetings. So they need to have a clear and concise agenda distributed prior to the meeting. Anything that needs discussion and decision should be included, and depending on what type of meeting, attendees should be given the opportunity to add any relevant items to the meeting agenda. So ideally you send the agenda out advance time, and then asking for input or feedback, and if anything else needs to be included on the agenda. So always in the back of our mind, we should have efficiency, and people are busy. If there is an opportunity to get a whole lot of stakeholders in one place at one time, you may be able to expand the scope of the meeting potentially to include important things that are also coming up. So just think about that in the back of your mind. If that happens, you get the feedback, update the agenda, and then send out the finalised agenda. So the agenda will outline what will happen at the meeting, what topics are going to be discussed. So it's a list of essential topics that need to be dealt with, and in order of the presentation. So it advises your participants what it's about and what role they are expected to play in the meeting. So again, you don't want to be inviting people who don't need to be there. Okay, so if they can't really work out what their role is, maybe they're not required. But when having an agenda doesn't always imply unquestioning devotion to it and sticking rigidly to it. Sometimes things might sort of start to go a little bit off topic, or a key component of a particular part of your business that's being discussed may start to evolve as its own item throughout the meeting, and that may be something to be aware of. So if you have got an agenda item that could be problematic, it might take extra time. Just think about that. Does it need to be broken up, or do you need to reorganise things to have another meeting specifically for that, or that might be a breakout meeting at some stage. So just thinking about these things at this stage. But the important thing is that during the actual conduct of the meeting, that things don't go off the rails and everything else gets missed because you're sticking to you've been going down the rabbit hole, as it were, with a particular item at the expense of all the other things that need to be discussed. So that again comes down to what role people are going to play in the meeting, and them knowing that role and who's doing what. So we touched on the agendas should be distributed prior to the meeting, so in advance notice. People get a chance to prepare then. So items on the agenda, these are just examples. When you do your assessments, you'll be able to come up with your own agenda items. So as you're probably aware from the previous webinar or involvement in your own meetings can take on many different forms and levels of formality. So this is just an example. I will bring one up on the screen in Word format for you, just one that I've found on the net through a template. So you can use pretty well whatever you want. You'll be given some scenarios in your in this week's formative assessment, so you can sort of work with whatever you want to work with, really, as long as you're sort of following a structure and roughly meeting these criteria. But these are just examples. So you have a welcome. The minutes of the previous meeting, if there was a previous meeting, is important, because there may be outstanding action items from a previous meeting that are going to be addressed in this one. The minutes of a previous meeting also need to be accepted at the next meeting. So minutes are normally something that are presented. You might have business that's arisen from the previous meeting, correspondence, so anything that has been come in or come out of the organisation that needs to be reported on. If it's a volunteer organisation that the meeting's for, you might have membership applications, you might have incident reports, you might have requests for assistance or anything. So that's what correspondence means. There may be reports, so financial reports. You might have so treasurer's reports. You might have volunteer coordinator reports. So any different reports might come in. And then you get to the agenda item, so what you're actually talking about this particular meeting. Some meetings will have presenters, so that would be a good idea to put them on your agenda before you send it out. You also will have time for general business, so things that might just come up at the meeting. And then question or discussion times, the date of the next meeting, and then the meeting will close. So I'll just bring up an example meeting agenda. So like I said, you can use whatever you want for your assessments, like preferably it'll be a meeting that's going to be held at your own workplace with using your own documentation and your own templates. But if you don't have those sort of things, or you just wish to use something else, feel free to find whatever you like. So I'm just going to open up this particular so this is just a board meeting agenda template I found online. The link is on the PowerPoint slide, so if you do want to go and find it. So again, this isn't something you have to use. There are different examples in your book, in your learning material. So, but this is just sort of goes along the lines that that we're looking at. Okay. So there we go. So yeah, so that one's online. If you wish to use it for this particular assessment, go for it. But by no means do you have to. Okay, so that's just an example meeting agenda there. Okay, the next point we're going to look at is checking documentation and accuracy for errors. So we talked about this in the first unit we did, I believe, so WRT 401, about documents being proofread, checked, spelling, grammar, all these sort of things. So, so documents that you're going to use in your meeting, they've got to be checked to make sure the information is accurate. There's no spelling errors. So the proofreading involves reading and checking for errors, checking the design, checking the layout. So if you've got an electronic document, you can print it out and go through it that way. Or probably the best way, if you've got time and you've got the resources, you want to be able to get someone else to have a look at it, especially if it's something that you're looking at quite a bit. You can just sort of get a bit, everything sort of blends into one sort of thing. So it might, so it might just be like a fatigue thing. You've been looking at this document all the time, so it might just take a very short circulation of it to a work colleague or someone to have a look and look at those sort of things. So when you're looking at the document, make sure you're looking at spelling, the consistency of spelling. So like you're using S's instead of Z's in documents, which is quite common. So the American versus the UK, Australian type spelling. So looking at consistencies of fonts and appropriateness of heading, style, and these sort of things. And of course, meeting your organisational requirements. So if you've got a template, make sure it's the up-to-date template, and those sort of basic things that you want to keep looking at. So again, this sort of harks back to our first unit. So the traps with using spelling and grammar tools. So they can be good, but we have to use them with caution. Things like if you've got predictive text set up on your Word document, so it might autofill type things, or the automatic spell changing type software. So you can fall into the trap of your and you are, there and there, two and two. So two and two and lose and loose are very, very common, and some people just don't know how to use those words any day, let alone if spell check's going to go and do things like that for you. So spelling and grammar check. So it is limited, used with caution. So yeah, there are traps with them. So and like I said, with the organise and the organiser, like the S and the Z, that's fine. It's becoming more common that people do use the Americanized spelling in documents and in assignments and things like that. But if you're going to do it, make sure that it's consistent throughout your document that you're going to, or the meeting stuff that you're going to prepare and distribute. So if you use organise with an S at the beginning of your document, make sure you use it consistently throughout the document. So yeah, so that's just a very short thing on spelling and grammar, and more of a rehash of what we did in WRT 401. Okay, so distributing documentation to participants within the designated timelines and preparing spare sets of documents, which is 2.4. So in some cases, our documentation information will be distributed well before the meeting. So we talked about that with the agenda before. But there may be other things that need to be, that people need to have an awareness of, have read and understood, maybe conducted their own bit of analysis on prior to the meeting, because they will generate questions. They may be asked to be to speak or present on it. So so it might be necessary to get things to them beforehand. So for example, the meeting might have something to do with coming up with a new policy or a new procedure. So it might be prudent to send out the old policy and the old procedure, of the old policy along with the new policy or the proposed policy, so people can see what changes are being made and those sort of things. So so that's just something to be considerate of, and having enough time, lead time, to be able to give the people that, and then being able to digest that information or understand it. So handouts might also be sent prior, which might be unusual. You might want to do that at the actual meeting itself as part of a registration process. Depending on the numbers, it can get quite awkward if people do have to have handouts and people are walking around a room trying to grab them or whatever. So it will depend on the participant requirements and your particular venue and how you want to do it. But just think about, if you've got a smaller number of people, you could probably just turn up with a folder and give it to them at the time. If you've got a reasonable number of people, you might want to put it on a desk and have name tags where they're going to be sitting, those sort of things. Or if it's a public type meeting or whatever, people may have to register. That might be the time to give them the handout when they write in their registration and those sort of things. So different ways of doing things. And the type of handouts, they could be reports, they could be previous minutes, which are always a good thing to have at many meetings, to actually have the minutes there. Correspondence, so if there's something important that needs to be conveyed to the group, a copy of that correspondence could be good. Or, you know, if you're running on a budget and you don't need to be printing all this stuff, you might have some of this stuff up on a screen. But it is good to have a hard copy with people, so people can write notes and do those sort of things on there. Yeah, so think about how you're going to do those handouts. That will be part of your assessment for this unit as well. So if it's complex documentation, yeah, they've got to be given time. People got to be given time to read it. So the cons of not having that stuff distributed before, if they're expected to read a lot of stuff on the spot, or you haven't given people enough time, you're setting yourself up for a failure, really, because people will come to a meeting underprepared. They won't have questions, or have well thought out questions. It might just turn into a complete waste of time. The meeting might go longer than what it should because someone has to explain a whole heap of things over and over again, which could have been avoided with a bit better preparation. Or people might just go, I'm not even going to this meeting. It's a waste of time. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. There's too much to think about here, and I really don't want to. I really don't want to vote yes on this particular subject when I don't know enough about it. So people might just be put off from going altogether. So how are we going to distribute these things? So if you've got some of the documentation electronically, it'll be emailed out. You may need to post things out. It may need registered posts. So some documentation that's going to be used for a meeting may be required to be registered. So you've got to allow for those lead times and those sort of things. Or it's not uncommon to have things relating to meetings on workplace intranets. So if you're not familiar with that term, so larger organisations normally have their own internal internet, so things might be posted up on that. Again, depending on the meeting and the context, think about privacy and those ethical type things, legal and ethical type things. So I know some organisations, especially volunteer or sporting ones, will put minutes and agendas and things on like open source, so Facebook or on Team app, things like that. So little like networking apps for particular groups. But just be aware of those sort of things, especially if you're putting people's email addresses and people's phone numbers and those sort of things. So you've got to be very careful about that. So if you're going to distribute things like that, it has to be, you know, you've got to be very careful that you're not violating someone's privacy by doing something like that. But it is a way of distributing information. So yeah, having spare sets of documents. So if you're going to have a meeting, it's always a good idea to have extra copies of things taken along. Just good planning. Someone may bring an extra person, like ideally not, depending on the meeting. You don't want people just turning up on the day if it's quite a formal thing. But someone might come along as a second in charge, or someone who's being mentored to be a team leader or whatever. So you might end up with extra people there. And then you also may have the case where information needs to be taken back. So someone might be delegated a responsibility or an action item, and they know that they need to get someone else to help with that. So it can just be helpful for them to take things back to their workplace or their area when they're looking at discussing things. So we need to make extra copies. So good planning and making sure that you've got a procedure how you're going to do that. People might need to sign for things if it's like a commercially sensitive document or whatever. So just think about all these different things, and you don't want to be making 100 extra copies and only 2 or 3 people might turn up. So you just got to be smart about how you do it. You might just end up saying, yeah, I'll email copies of this to everyone afterwards, whatever. But this is just to get you thinking about different things and how you can do it. The other documents that you might have to have like your policies and procedures there. So you might need spare sets of those documents at your meetings. So if you're at a meeting with a dozen people and you're talking about different policies and procedures, you might need some copies of the current policies and procedures. You might need HR documents. You might need all these sort of things. So you want a few extra copies of those things so people can refer to it throughout or in breaks and things like that. So just have a think about how those things are going to, how you're going to handle those sort of things. So yeah, always making extra copies. Just before I finish up, I'm just going to put on a quick, this is quite a funny clip, but it just sort of, because we're moving into the stage of this particular unit where we've got to start thinking about our practical task, which is actually to organise, to plan for, conduct, do meetings, all those sort of things. So I'll go through that after this clip. But having a virtual meeting, so it's just a little bit of a funny clip, but there's some good points in there to think about if you are planning to hold your meeting via webinar or web conference or teleconference. So I'll just pass this on, and hopefully you'll enjoy it and get something out of it.
Trip Crosby has joined the meeting.
has joined the meeting.
Hello?
Tyler?
No, this is Beth from ICS.
Oh, hey, Beth. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Yeah. Just making it,
Tyler?
Has joined the meeting.
All right, well, this is Trip. Who's here? Tyler's here.
Beth's here.
Okay, the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the...
Yeah, I'll be able to do it in like 30 minutes. John?
Has joined the meeting.
Hi, John. Hi. I was just trying to go over the purpose of today's meeting, which is to discuss the deliverable. Tyler?
Has joined the meeting.
Sorry, guys, I got cut off.
Is Paul here? Send him an invite.
Put in your access code.
No, that's your PIN number.
It should be a 9-digit number.
Try pressing the pound key.
Paul,
Has joined the meeting.
any questions before we move on?
Yes, this is Beth. What's our best plan of attack for the second quarter?
Question
What
actually...
we should do.
Oh,
Go ahead. Oh, I think
Well,
what we should do.
It
is
actually
really
depends on
diversify.
how you look at it.
No,
'Cause the
really come.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I
I think
Given
what we-
sales,
what we
we're at
really-
a-
I think
Let me just say that
Okay.
was a great graph, John. Tyler?
Well, my main concern with the projections from here was that they're just insufficient. I mean, they're not even taking into account.
Did we lose Tyler again?
Hello?
John, are you guys taking distributions? John?
Oh, my bad. I was on mute. Let me start over.
So I've prepared a presentation. I'm sharing it with all of you. You should be able to see it on your screen right now.
Got it.
I don't see a link anywhere.
This says I need to download a plugin.
We are all using Macs, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
How can you, of course?
Financials are looking great. Paul, do you have any comments on staffing?
I was thinking about that because we get a few more contractor types in. Oh, I'm sorry.
Get down.
I don't know. I feel like when I looked at the numbers last quarter, that you couldn't really tell a huge difference. So if we were to really tighten that up, then
To me, staffing is a huge impact.
that?
Is that me?
That's not me, I don't think.
I just want to go over a couple of details as we move into our next section here. We got 3 new departments coming on board.
Break it up a little bit, guys.
By the end of Q3.
Driving to
So
a dead
I need
spot.
everyone to give me detailed evaluations each
Sorry,
month
guys.
so that we know. That's it, guys. Beth, you'll send out a recap email that could have basically taken the place of this whole meeting, correct?
Yep, always do.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Beth. Dave, you been here the whole time? Yeah. Huh. Well, thanks everyone once again. Oh, one more. Hey, Trip and Tyler here, and
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that meeting. It's certainly something I've come across over the years doing teleconferences and things like Zoom. So yeah, just for the things to keep in the back of your mind with when you are planning your meeting, that these sort of things can happen. So yeah, the objectives of today were to have a look at preparing notice of meeting agenda and meeting papers in accordance with requirements, checking documentation for accuracy and correct any errors, distributing documentation to participants within designated timelines, and preparing spare sets of documents. So yeah, the key points out of today, using the appropriate format for the agenda. So I showed you an example which is available on the web. So there are many different formats for agendas. So go with whatever suits your particular requirements or whatever your organisation needs. And for the assignment for this particular unit, yeah, so you can use whatever you like, but you know, preferably it'd be something that you will be using or you currently use. So doesn't have to be complex, that's for sure. When we're checking and proofing our documents, getting other people to look over them, so be it your agenda or any stuff that you need to be looking at for your particular meeting that's going to be discussed, and your reports, those sort of things, checking and proofing them. Being careful of your spelling and grammar checking as always. So distribution of your documents, thinking about how you're going to get them out to people, when are you going to do it, what are the time frames, whether you do it at the meeting or before the meeting, and those sort of things. And preparing extra sets of documents. Okay, so I've got a little bit to talk about here with what's coming up. So from today, e-learning, so you'll be enrolled in BSB ADM 405 on Catapult. So today is part 2. So the questions from today are questions 6 to 8 in the e-learning. So there's only 3 not very difficult questions. In summative assessment 1 on this particular unit, today relates to question 3, so if you can do that. And the big thing to start thinking about now is the project, so summative assessment 2. So this is project 1 in your in the e-learning. I'll bring up a slide. It might be a little bit small to read, but I'll bring it up anyway, just so you can have a look and we'll talk to it. So for this unit, we have to do a real meeting, okay, so to meet the competency requirements for this unit. So it involves organising a workplace meeting, so it can be a real meeting in your own workplace. We will have an option of actually doing a role play meeting at the college in Franklin Street in the city, if you would like to do that. So again, it won't be a long meeting. It'll be you organising a meeting, going through everything I'm going to show you in the next slide, and actually physically doing the meeting at the college. So we'll have a couple of people standing in, probably myself and Stuart. Ray might be there, yourself, and whoever else. So we don't need a lot of people. But we can do like a role play a meeting at the college, or what probably will be preferable for a lot of people will be to do a role play via this medium, so Zoom, webinar, teleconference, or Skype, or whatever. So start thinking about how you're going to do that. So for the workplace meeting, we don't need to physically be there, but there are requirements that have to be met through, like, your supervisor and evidence of you conducting a meeting and doing all the different things that are required. So we'll start talking about that. Just keep an eye on your emails about how you're going to do it. So it might be easier if you just go, hey, I'm just going to do a role play via webinar, and you can have your own scenario, or we've actually generated a scenario for you to be able to provide to do these tasks. So organise the meeting. So we've got a scenario, and we've also got like an email which will be used as part of the scenario. So you can do that. Any questions, like, we'll put some more guidance out about it, about how to do it. You have got quite a bit of time to do this, so purposely sort of introducing this now, because next week we've got the last unit for this particular, or last element for this particular unit, and then we've got a 2-week break to get all these things done and organise that. So catch up on your previous assessments, do this meeting, organise it, and go through it. So you have got, well, from today, there's about over 4 weeks to be able to get this done. So just have a think about it. All right, I've got a meeting coming up at work. I'd like to use that. We need to know that you're going to use that as your assessment for this project. Or you go, you know what, I think I'd rather just go into the college one day. We'll tee up a time and we'll do the role play at the college. So that, using your own scenario, or using a scenario that we can provide you, or you can do it via Zoom, and we'll just log in, have a few extra people log in. So we'll try and get a couple of students potentially from this course, myself, maybe Ray and Stuart might be involved as well. So, and we can play whatever roles that you want us to, or we can play the roles that are in that role play that we've made up. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Again, just keep an eye on your emails, as there'll be things coming out about that. I will bring up the project on the next slide, but the next session will be next Thursday. So the next webinar will be Thursday, the 21st at 10 o'clock, same thing. And we're talking about recording and producing the minutes of the meeting. Okay. So this may be a little bit hard to read. Sorry, I'm just going to move my Zoom control panel out. So this is directly from Catapult, your e-learning material. So if you go into your e-learning, go down to Summative Assessment 2. This is Project 1. So have a bit of a read of that now if you can, or in your own time, but soon. And just start thinking about what you're going to do and what might be the best way for you to do this. What the best medium is, workplace, simulated over Zoom or over Skype or teleconference, or coming into the college. So have a bit of a think about that, what you're going to do, and all of the different considerations which we've been talking about the last 2 weeks. So there's a little bit to do in there, but the meeting doesn't have to be a huge 1-hour meeting about something. It's very, very basic. We just got to make sure we hit all of the different requirements that the unit of competency requires. Okay, so like I said, there'll be a bit more guidance come out shortly about that. So yeah. So that's it. That's it for today. Thanks for coming along. I hope it was informative. I hope you enjoyed the 2 clips that I put on. This webinar will be sent out. The link to it anyway will be sent out in the next within the next day or 2. In the meantime, if you've got any questions about outstanding assessments, what's coming up, anything really, please fire them through. If you've got ideas for your meetings, please send them through. Anything really. So please let us know if there's any way we can help. Like I said, we're going to have a 2-week break at the end of this particular unit before we start the next unit, and that's all been mapped out through till the end of the year. So if you look on Accelerate, so not on Catapult, on the other side of the Enable online login for your student management, you'll see that you're enrolled all the way through to the end of the year. So at that stage, I think the 19th is going to be our planned 19th of December is going to be our planned last unit of competency, or that'll be the last week of webinars for the Cert 4. So it's great to see many of our students are tracking along really well and really engaging with the coursework, and obviously doing some really good things with time management, and communication is the key. So please don't be afraid to send any emails through if you've got a question, you're stuck on a particular question in the assessment tasks, or you've got some ideas about what you want to do for particular assessments. Please let us know. So yeah, I hope you all have a great weekend. And we look forward to catching up again next Thursday if you're available. Otherwise, take care, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks.